So we are going to bring on Dr. Andrew Moore, who is the Dean of the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University. He's a professor of computer science and robotics. He's involved in so many interesting things, has really been a change agent for our city of Pittsburgh because he has attracted some iconic technology companies here, beginning with Google. And we're just fortunate to have him in our community, just sort of getting all this critical mass going for the robotics and just very advanced applications that are taking place. Andrew is also going to be interviewing Steve Wozniak tomorrow night at the Carnegie Music Hall. So we're so happy he'll be able to do that for us because I think Andrew is known for communicating complicated computer science concepts to the layman, and that's a talent to have. So we're not going to get like caught in the weeds somewhere not understanding anything. I think it's going to be a wonderful conversation, and if you haven't been planning to attend, I hope you will attend tomorrow at 8 o'clock at the Carnegie Music Hall. So it gives me great pleasure to bring Andrew Moore onto the stage. If you'll welcome him, please.
Good afternoon. I'm very grateful for the chance to be here today. What I wanted to do was try to transmit what it's like working in the field of artificial intelligence at the moment. I'm from Carnegie Mellon, where we have about 200 faculty in the School of Computer Science working on different aspects of AI, and about 1,000 students every year graduating with these skills. So it's an environment at the moment which every day I get up and I'm amazed by things that I hear the students are doing, and it feels sometimes as if the advancements almost every week now are things which I'm finding it hard to keep up with, and it's my job to keep up with it. So I'm not going to give you an overview of everything that's happening at the moment, but because this wonderful conference is all about thinking strategically and getting ready for what happens next, I want to give a flavor of 3 of the things which are top of mind in the world of AI right now. So if I could have the next slide. I want to begin by talking about when AI began, and it was in a conference in Dartmouth, United States in 1965. 2 Carnegie Mellon professors and a professor from MIT and Stanford got together and realized that this slowly developing world of computation was not just going to be about data processing, but could actually be used to attempt to simulate or emulate intelligence. I'm going to give you a very high-level picture of how we got from 1965 to here, and then I will tell you about these 3 things which are the ones which sort of keep me up at night. Okay, so next slide. The first thing that humans do, or intelligent creatures seem to do, is they're very good at perception. Next slide. Decision. And the third slide, act. So if you're building an AI, you're building something which can do all of these 3 things. And usually, although it's a gray area, if it's doing those things at the skill level which previously we thought that it had to use a human being to do it, then you're building an AI. Now, everything was going well from 1965 to about 1990. Computers were just horribly slow. I cannot believe how we did anything when we had about a 10 millionth of the compute power that we do today. But a lot of progress came up in understanding all the questions of perceptions, decisions, and actions, and how they interact. So that was good. And it culminated, I think, in the first major part of AI's history in an AI beating Kasparov, the world champion chess player, in 1997. And that was so exciting, but then we entered a kind of AI winter after that. And what happened was, we in the AI world had got very good at decide, perceive, and act. But when you think about what you need to do to make a decision, you've got to keep thinking in some way of, what if I take this action? What's going to happen? Well, maybe it's better to take this action. What's going to happen? And if you saw what was going on in the Deep Blue chess program, it was able to, every second, do about 10 million of those what-if predictions of, what if I do this, what's going to happen? And we were thrilled by this. The problem was that throughout most of industry, this includes the energy industries as well as healthcare and information science and transportation, we couldn't find software engineers who could write the computer programs which are able to predict what's going to happen next if I do this action. That slowed us down. And frankly, even at Carnegie Mellon, probably the strongest center of AI over the last 50 years, AI went into a bit of decline, and where we used to have 300 students a year taking AI classes, it went down to maybe only 100. And it was because of this terrible problem that Decide, which we were able to do pretty well, so rarely was able to find something which could predict the consequences of an action. Then, starting in about 95, getting up slowly to about 2005, and then suddenly going crazy over the last decade, the whole field figured out the right way to help predict what happens next. So go to the next slide. It's this area of machine learning. The fact is that initially, before Google, there were companies which tried to predict what's the right thing to show to a user by having software engineers write down a set of rules with things like, well, if the query involves the word buy, B-U-Y, let's send them to a shopping site, and so forth. And those became impractical programs. So the idea quickly came up, why don't we instead just look at the last 2 billion examples of someone being shown stuff, see what they clicked on, and then use that to train up something which can automatically generate one of those programs to predict what happens next. Not just in the cases that the computer's seen before, but generalize it to new cases. This was an idea which has been worth trillions of dollars over the last decade. So that was exciting. We, throughout the industry, went crazy on machine learning. And now we're at a stage where, frankly, the technology behind machine learning has become somewhat commoditized. There are very good systems, and of course people are making incremental improvements on them, but the machine learning systems are in place now where when we're trying to automate decisions, we can leave it to the machine learning system to predict the consequences of the possible actions we take. This is, of course, what's fueled the growth in self-driving and the growth in useful health informatics systems and many other areas of commerce. So that's where we are. And what's now happened, now that we've got our acts together with machine learning, you're seeing that same perhaps over-optimistic enthusiasm of the mid-90s suddenly come back because all these tools which are written to emulate intelligence are now possible thanks to the fact that we've got these models. So let's go to the next slide. This is just showing some of the kinds of places which completely revolutionized the way they operate through the use of machine learning. And things like transportation, the ability to proactively figure out which parts of an engine are likely to have trouble. So, thanks to our previous speaker, we can quickly print out another version of that component of the engine while we're in flight and install it before we land. Each of these things is now possible through machine learning. All right, now let's look at 2017. Next slide, please. The big theme I see running through the faculty and students at Carnegie Mellon, and that I see in all the AI startups sprouting out around Pittsburgh at the moment, is, ironically, it's humans. How humans interact with these decision-making systems. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of this and then sort of lead this up to the conclusion of what I see are the strategic things to think about with AI next. So if we can go to the next slide. This is something which is really changing things. This video is now very old-fashioned because it's 18 months old. But with the growth of resolution and frame rate in small devices such as cell phone cameras, when you're watching a human face, you can now track every patch of skin on the face. What you can do with that, thanks to machine learning, is actually then figure out what the muscles are doing underneath the face. There is a strong psychological theory of how various emotional states, both conscious and unconscious, influence what the muscles are doing. So we can now watch a person, and every month we're getting better at estimating what's going on psychologically. And as many of you know, an important business skill is to be able to read people. And the big battle at the moment isn't about chess. It's we're waiting for the point where computers are just generally better at reading people than humans are. One example of why this is so exciting is in the treatment of mental illness. A faculty member at the University of Pittsburgh, working with some roboticists at CMU, has run an experiment of a large panel of patients being treated for depression. And when the patient is being given their treatments, it's very important to know if the treatment's having an effect. By watching 1 minute of video of each patient every day, the AI system is now able to predict whether the treatment's having an effect 6 weeks before the physician or even the patient is able to see. So that's profound and could be wonderful for that specific case. But as you can imagine, there's hundreds of other use cases for this ability. Many of them are really exciting. Some of them in security areas are exciting, could be used for good or could be used for evil. A totalitarian country with this technology could conceivably start to look at the question of, when someone smiles when I mention the president's name, is that a real smile or a fake smile? So that is interesting, and this is going to be a very big disruption. And you see that what it is we're now fusing artificial intelligence with the understanding of humans. If we can move to the next slide, I want to show an example of why I love my job so much. I came in, we actually don't need the music, nice though it is. It's Uptown Funk if you're interested. And some graduate students who'd just been fooling around realized that through what they learned in their deep neural networks class, they could do something which no one has been able to do previously, which is to actually fully track the limb movements of hundreds of people simultaneously in real time using, and this was the big new thing, a single cell phone camera. In fact, this example is just being run on regular footage downloaded from YouTube. So now, they did this was fun and cool, but immediately again you start to find yourself in a situation where you say, I need 10 product managers and 10 CEOs for 10 new companies which are going to use this. Some of the first things that people thought about were, well, this would be great in a dance class, for instance, for helping people actually see where they're doing well and poorly and training them. And someone else said, hey, I just remembered that I'm really annoyed in diving competitions where the judges seem to be not being objective in their decisions. We can now actually measure exactly what's happening during a dive. Other folks have started to look at the fact that if you have a group of people talking to each other, there's a well-established understanding that certain power relationships or certain knowledge of the confidence of the folks participating can be gleaned from when they move forward, backwards in a conversation, how they're using their hands, and many aspects of understanding more about the human condition from this. So again, none of you are listening to me, you're looking at the pretty pictures. But anyway, it's exciting, and we don't have enough people to follow up on all of these things. Let's move to the next slide. The next thing which is consuming of us, especially the senior faculty, are very concerned about this question, is safety in a world where autonomous systems and systems giving potentially life-critical advice to humans are out there. We are very worried that the software development processes used in fun, non-safety critical industries like search engines or movie recommendations or social networks, those systems are very advanced, but they can be launched safely without checking every single aspect of the system. Whereas so many other parts of all the applications that many people in this room are directly involved with, systems aren't just fun things for people to interact with. They make life or death decisions all the time. And unlike construction or manufacturing or areas of healthcare which are legislated by government organizations such as the FDA, unlike all of those, we actually do not have a good theory of safety in these systems. And this is, we believe, quite likely to be something which sets back the deployment of large-scale AI systems by potentially a decade or two. And this picture is a stark example. This is a really useful, well-designed, sensible project by the US Army to allow safe convoying of vehicles in dangerous situations. So this is not as advanced as self-driving trucks. This is a human drives the truck in the front. The remaining trunks behind the human are autonomously driven, so there's far less life in danger, and folks who are concentrating on protecting the humans can really focus on the front truck. It's been ready to launch for potentially half a decade at this point. The one thing which is killing it is we have not found the technology to come up with the proof that this is safe under all circumstances. Now, why is it harder for us in AI to do this than it would be, say, for someone building a fly-by-wire cockpit control system? The answer is, and it comes back to the first point I tried to make, it's to do with the machine learning. When you have a system which is actually always having to learn from experience to improve itself, you can't just run a few thousand test cases and check that it does well at all of those few thousands. To do the same amount of testing, you would have to give your robot almost every possible lifetime. What happens to a robot who is trained initially during the dark days of winter in a snowy environment, when suddenly there's a sunny day with a low-lying piece of sun which no one has seen before? What will the machine learning system do? The big machine learning systems in industry, such as the ones that drive the big search engines, they do occasionally go a little bit crazy, but the craziness that you see results in something like, if you search for a toaster, among the results of pictures of toasters, there's a high-heeled shoe in the middle of it. And we all laugh and say, that's cute. But if you've got an autonomous vehicle barreling down a freeway, and it has over the last few hours learnt that shadows are coming from the right in general, but then because of some strange reflection suddenly gets it wrong, it could go out of bounds. So this is, I don't have time to tell you how the academic world and the industrial world are facing the question of making AI systems safe. But this is an area where you're seeing lots of investment, mostly in the academic sector at the moment, so that we can start to deploy these systems without having to wait, in this case, half a decade before we even begun to believe that we're able to test them properly. Next slide is another nice example of this. This was work done by one of the professors in the School of Computer Science who wanted to show how a part of AI called automatic theorem provers, can take a newly designed system and prove that it's safe under all circumstances. And he applied it to the new FAA collision avoidance system to show, even on a very large-scale system, how you can prove safety. He ran it about 2.5 years ago and found a few 100,000 classes of bugs. So that was important because we actually weren't expecting at the time that there were any problems left in it. So we were able to go back, revise those bugs, and so the system, which is due to launch in the next 12 months, is going to be safer because we've been able to do automatic theorem proving. So many people out there in the community are worried about AI safety, and the answer, at least coming from folks in faculties such as CMU, is not don't worry, it's you should be worried. We have not yet, the technology for proving safety of a safety-critical AI system is not there yet. And for example, we would consider it extremely dangerous and maybe not even ethical to run self-driving vehicles without a trained human operator on the roads right now. All right, number 3, let's move on to the next issue. Like a lot of people, and this is exactly something which anyone in the stock market lives, anyone who does farming lives, I'm never happy. So part of the time, I and my students are really worried that what we're doing at the moment with AI is going to cause some sort of devastation in society because of not enough jobs. But at the same time, I'm unhappy about something else. Next slide. Pittsburgh is frankly facing a bit of a crisis at the moment in very high-tech trained people that we just don't have enough. As I've alluded to earlier, when we see the new technologies which are already there, we're not waiting for 2 more years for something else to get developed. The basic technology stack is already there. There just aren't enough people to build all the products we can immediately say could be built. And this is why you're seeing these rather crazy bidding wars over salaries and beautiful working conditions for the people who can follow AI. So that is why, as you can see, I'm never happy. But at the same time, there's something wrong with this picture. We're worried that there aren't enough jobs, and we're worried that we can't find people to fill jobs. So clearly, a major role for universities around the world, and this very much includes the really exciting growth of educational establishments in all the major Middle Eastern countries, is going to be an absolutely key thing to invest in at the moment. Now, to describe another interesting facet of this, I want to show you another example of an AI system. So let's go to the next slide. All right, now this is a nice little product. It's something which just makes climbing walls more fun. You can see how this is something that you could easily sell to climbing wall runners, and it's a nice program which uses some machine learning and computer vision to figure out how to detect when a user has followed a certain path that it's projecting. So a nice product, something you can have fun with, and a perfect example of an AI deployment. Here's the good news about this one. This was built by a team of 5 students who 13 weeks before knew nothing about programming. One of the good pieces of news in the world of artificial intelligence is that while we're building much more automatic technologies, deploying them has also become much more automatic. So there are these big underlying open systems. Some of you may have heard of Google's TensorFlow, for example, or the academic community's OpenCV, a computer vision application. You can now use these, and with moderate training, not 4 years of undergraduate and 7 years of Ph.D., with moderate training, start to build stuff out of these components. So there is where the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon, in collaboration with a number of other governmental organizations and foundations and outreach folks, we're really trying to push hard on projects to quickly help folks, not just kids, but adults, transition to being able to build stuff out of the AI components. Let's jump onto the next slide. Another really good example of this, and one of the things which I've most enjoyed so far during my time as dean, is watching what's happening in education in the Middle East. And as many of you know, Carnegie Mellon has a campus in Qatar. We have 3 major programs there: computer science, information systems, and business. And as an example, why I'm so excited about this is, given the worldwide shortage of talent, anywhere which starts to produce more such talent becomes a very, very interesting place to invest in. These are some of the students from the computer science program, and one of the interesting things that's happening there is these computer science students are also not satisfied with the current technologies they see. So a number of these CS students, when they graduate, are, instead of just going off to work for another big company in the region, doing startups. One really nice startup, which we're all very excited about now at CMU, is a group of students who are dissatisfied with the way that curriculums of courses are being chained together in their educational programs. And it's true, embarrassingly enough, at CMU, we're using early 1990s technology for running these things. So the students at Qatar weren't having any of that. They built a much more modern implementation, which actually now enables them to give advice to students instead of just just telling them the rules. And now they've had a large amount of venture capital put into them, and their product is now slated to grow quickly for sale to hundreds of institutions around the world. So these are the good pieces of news. Although there's a massive shortage of folks in this area, you can produce them if you work at it by doing things like starting out educational missions for your country or for your organization. All right, I'm about to wrap up. Let's move to the penultimate slide. This was the punchline. It is absolutely the case that compared with the 1990s, which is when I sort of entered the field of AI, nowadays, if you're working in AI, most of your thought processes are actually around the humans as opposed to being around the technology. That's where we're putting all our efforts, keeping them safe, understanding them, and letting them get involved in this new world. So final slide. There we go. Now, that's exactly what I just said. I realized I tried to make a joke of doing a smiley face on our human to show that it looks like a monster, terrible demon robot. So probably this is not the image to remember here when we're talking about AI and humans. Anyway, thank you very much for giving me a chance to get this off my chest, and I enjoyed talking.
Hi, my name is Bill Flanagan. I'm with the Allegheny Conference on Community Development here in Pittsburgh, but I think they asked me to do this next little Q&A and debrief because of the other hat I wear as the host of Our Region's Business on WPXI TV, Sundays at 11 on Channel 11. And for the next 10 minutes or so, we'd like to get some questions from the audience. Why don't you have a seat? You can relax a little bit. That was a terrific presentation. But I want to start out with one thing right out of the gate, because I think it's related to what you said about safety and humans and jobs and all the rest of it. And you know, we've got these robot cars running all around Pittsburgh. Fortunately, there's a safety driver on board, so you're taking care of that. But there is this growing sense that, oh my God, this is right around the corner. There won't be any taxi drivers anymore. There won't be any Uber drivers. That's almost a little bit of a fear around the technology. Sounds to me, because of the safety concern alone, we're still a little ways from having these kinds of vehicles just out there running around by themselves.
Yes, I'm still holding with my prediction that it's not going to be until 2029 that we have 50% of our vehicles autonomous.
50%?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's another 12 years. Probably we are going to see this on freeways with trucks, but the trucks will park at the edge of the cities, and then a human will take over control. And that may only be a few years out. And that in itself is going to be a serious job dislocation. So it's not going to all happen next year, but no one who's planning for a healthy society over the next couple of decades can ignore the fact that there are going to be big changes.
Well, and the flip side of that, of course, is there's trucking companies right now that are struggling to find enough people with commercial driver's licenses to be able to drive the truck. So there's a real balancing here. This is an answer to a real challenge the industry is facing.
Yes.
But if you've got one of those trucking jobs, it's potentially a threat to you as an individual.
Yes. So during the previous major industrial revolutions, with one exception, at the time that society was changing because of automation, governments put in major programs for education. For example, between the 1910s and 1930s, that was the period in the United States when we went from it being uncommon for folks to go all the way through high school to the point where it was extremely common. And then after the Second World War, the GI Bill also made sure that folks were getting those educational skills.
So if you were working on a farm, 6th grade was plenty, probably.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
But the country made the decision that we're now using much more productive technologies which actually need more education and training to be able to use them. So let's do that. And that's what helped us eventually in the 1950s and 60s start to see a different kind of booming society than we'd seen in the agricultural age.
So where are we in that transition now when you look at our colleges and our workforce development system, especially here in the United States, but around the world, to prepare people for what's next?
I don't think we're doing enough. There are a few bright spots. For example, at Carnegie Mellon, our new incoming class of computer scientists is 50% women, 50% men. That's a bright spot because it's indicating that we're now covering both genders properly, where during the last decade across the United States, only 18% of the women, of the people in computer science training are women. So there's nice results like that. There is also the growth of these educational modalities other than the four-year college based on online learning and so forth, which helps. But despite that, we are still dramatically underperforming, I think, both this country and actually elsewhere in the world. One really interesting statistic is when you look at a university like CMU and you ask where are its computer scientists coming from, and you draw them on a map, you start to say, whoa, this is amplifying, not reducing the societal divides, because when you see where they're coming from the rich coastal areas or the rich metropolitan areas like Chicago, New York, San Francisco, of course. And then you superimpose that on a map of which counties teach computer science. Their school systems actually have computer science on the curriculum, and it looks almost exactly the same. By the way, Allegheny County needs to be congratulated because I'm really happy with it.
Yes, you're doing pretty well. All right, let's hear it for Pittsburgh. Yeah,
so that's good. But that is where we're not doing enough. It's actually just the fact that it's very hard, especially in a rural area, for a community to wake up to the fact that it needs to be training its folks in computer science.
Well, it's a resource issue for so many schools. If you're in a more rural, you don't have the great resources, you might say that's something, I got to concentrate on reading, writing, arithmetic, we need the fancy stuff for college, but it doesn't sound like we can afford to wait as much as we might have been able to before.
Very much so. If I could say, one analogy we're making when we're talking about this at the national level is a good software engineer is worth a certain number of barrels of oil, and it's a national resource for a country in the 21st century is how many great software engineers you have, which maybe is going to become more important eventually than the natural resources.
You might also have this perception, though, like it's going to be one giant leap. So I'm either going to be driving a truck, I'm going to need a Ph.D. from Carnegie Mellon. There's no middle anymore. Is there still going to be a middle that people can aspire to if they're not quite candidates for your computer science program?
So, me speaking personally, I'm frightened by that question because I'm not sure. Whereas when I talk to economists, actually economists from all parts of the political spectrum, they say, don't be so depressive, Andrew. Every single time we've seen increased automation, we've seen new jobs that no one predicted coming from it. And when you look at what's actually happened in the last 15 years, as more automation has gone into place, the number of jobs building on top of automation has actually increased. A perfect example is secretaries who used to have the job of typing, and now much less of that is happening. It's much less labor intensive, but the number of folks working with names like administrative assistant and executive assistant doing much more strategic thinking about how to manage the running of an office, that's actually grown. So there are more people in that role than there were before because they can use technology to make themselves more productive.
Well, in an ideal world, that's what you'd be doing, empowering people to be more effective, use more of their brain power, and waste less time doing all the paperwork and administrative stuff, right?
Yes.
Sounds like it's happening. Why don't we open it up? I know we've got 5 minutes left, but there must be some questions in the audience as well, and I don't want to hog all the time. Anybody have a question or comment for Dr. Moore? I think I can see out there. Yeah, right over there.
Thank you.
Is the microphone around? Is it floating? There it comes.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Excellent presentation. On the jobs question, I personally moved from Silicon Valley to here for the job. I was recruited, one of 40 people to become Vice President of Engineering at ANSYS, my previous company. And so it wasn't easy for me to move from Silicon Valley to here, but I loved the atmosphere, the job, the company, etc. And I did personally attract 20 people across the US and Canada to move to Pittsburgh. But in your opinion, what needs to be done, one on CMU level and two, City of Pittsburgh and then Pennsylvania, to attract people to this region? Thank you.
Very good question, because that is part of the big battle. One of the reasons you're seeing so many companies open up offices in cities like Pittsburgh is when you're trying to recruit and retain this top talent, it's not just about salary. It is about what life you lead and what life you have for your children. So thank you for what you're doing for Pittsburgh. I've also taken part in this question of convincing key people to move from a place which they never expected to move to come to Pittsburgh. And it's just really helped us in Pittsburgh that I think because of all the foundations and the existence of institutions like the Allegheny Conference, we have a city which is much more than just a tech hub. And so it was relatively easy to show people what Pittsburgh would be like to live in. I don't know if you found the same thing, but for us it was just introducing people to families living here and seeing what their day-to-day life is like. The fact that you can take the kids to a world-class museum with 10 minutes of planning, the fact that you've got all this green space around, the fact that to some extent the air quality is improving. Each of these things helped us recruit the top talent. But yes, it's actually, I believe, not enough for a city just to have excellent universities. You've got to give people a reason that they want to build their life there.
Another question, another comment out there. Yes, over there.
Yes, thank you very much. It's very fascinating. Anybody who spends time on your campus, it's remarkable the amount of foreign students that you attract from all over the world. So how has CMU been affected by the administration's program on limiting H-1B visas, the ban on certain countries, the crackdown on immigration? I mean, that has to some way impact your ability to attract quality students.
Yes, and that is, I mean, as you can probably tell from my accent, I did not grow up in Pittsburgh. Really? And when I was a kid, at the age of 6, I decided I wanted to be an American. It's because I wanted to live at the world center of technology. I didn't want to live in the peripheral place. So we've always done a good job of bringing people who want to be the best in the world to places like Pittsburgh and Boston and Palo Alto. We were really worried about what would happen, that there would be a perception outside the country that we were more hostile to foreign students. So far, this effect has been seen at a bunch of educational institutions in the United States, but the top top-tier, most famous ones, we have not actually seen a reduction in the number of applicants. In fact, our applicant pool for computer science has gone up year on year. For our undergraduate program, we had 8,000 applicants for 200 places. We're admitting a smaller fraction than Harvard or Princeton admit to their programs these days. So that's good. But at the same time, an absolutely amazing machine learning expert who I was trying to hire onto the faculty elected to go to a university in Canada instead because their family was worried about the implications for their safety. And that is an issue which has come up among my colleagues in academia quite frequently.
And how about on the back end? What about retaining some of these bright young people when they graduate from your program? Is that more of a challenge now because of the immigration issues?
I think it is a little bit, but I don't want to be too depressive about this. We are retaining many of these really smart folks. Many of them are going back, certainly with China and EMEA. It is a larger fraction of the students who go back to their home countries afterwards, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're actually very interested in exporting this sort of culture of crazy, exciting technological development to the rest of the world.
Very good. Maybe time for one more question.
So Andrew, hi.
Hi.
Rasu here. So on a panel earlier this morning, I talked about how, at least as far as healthcare is concerned, AI, artificial intelligence, it should really be augmented intelligence, AI, right? And you predicted earlier that in the driving industry, 50% of the cars will be autonomous vehicles by 2029.
Yep.
Any predictions for healthcare? Doctors are going to get replaced.
I realize I'm talking to one of the city's primary experts in that. I don't know if you'll agree with this, but one consensus that we've had in some of our discussion on AI automation is that maybe it is a safer job right now to be a nurse than a physician. That some of and you often get these weird things going on in artificial intelligence where some of the bits of human intelligence which we've thought are really highly trained, such as taking a whole bunch of different information, processing it to come up with a decision, that is something which we feel more comfortable automating. Again, I know I'm speaking to one of the world experts in this, so you get it. But doing Bayes' rule at a very large scale turns out to be an excellent way to actually trade off pieces of information, where even expert physicians are not so strong at that. On the other hand, those expert physicians, if they can talk well and pleasantly to frightened patients and reassure them and elicit true, correct answers from a nervous patient, they at the moment will outdo any AI which is just coming up with scary-looking printed questions on a web browser. There we introduced this very interesting question, which one of our faculty, LP Morency, is looking at right now. Can we have an AI which actually does watch your emotional state while it's talking to you in order to relax you into revealing your medical information more effectively?
Wow. Well, we could go on, but we've got a world of energy to talk about. So Dr. Moore from CMU, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah.